Welcome back to another episode of Strange Planet, and tonight we're going to delve into a favorite subject of mine that combines occult symbology and cinema. I'm a huge movie fan. So too is my guest, Robert W. Sullivan IV. He's an historian, philosopher, antiquarian, jurist, lay theologian, writer, mystic, radio and TV personality, best-selling author, CEO, lawyer, the author of 5 books, The Royal Arch of Enoch, Cinema Symbolism 1, 2, and 3, and a little bird tells me he's hard on work on Volume 4, and a work of fiction called A Pact with the Devil. He's a Freemason of Amicable St. John's Lodge, number 25, a 32nd degree of the Scottish Rite, Valley of Baltimore, Orient of Maryland. Robert W. Sullivan IV, welcome back. How are you?
Oh, I'm very well, Richard. Thank you for having me on Strange Planet once again. It's my absolute pleasure to be here with you.
We're going to do a bit of a departure here. I want to start off, and people may notice the JFK presidential limousine I have in the background. I don't know if you can make that out on the camera there, but because when we were on email back and forth trying to figure out where we're going to go with tonight's episode, you told me that you have this amazing story that was told related to you, having to do with the JFK assassination, more in particular, the great mystery of whatever happened to JFK's brain, because after he was after the autopsy, the brain mysteriously disappeared, or maybe it disappeared between the hospital in Dallas and where he was taken to in Maryland, I guess. So who told you this story, first of all?
The story was related to me by a Kennedy family insider many years ago. I cannot divulge this person's identity, but I will say the person is deceased. He or she is no longer alive. And I will say that the person did die under somewhat mysterious circumstances. But the story was told to me, and it was for starters, it's a story. But I had no reason to doubt it, and the story was related to me in complete truth. I mean, I had no reason to believe that this person was deceiving me. It was not told to me under any pretense of, oh, you got to keep quiet about this or don't tell anyone. I mean, I was in a conversation with this person, and it just came out. And he told me, or she told me, I know where it is, and I don't have firsthand knowledge of this. I did not witness this. But the story it resonates because I just was telling you off camera. I was on a show a couple months ago, and I told the same story, and it seemed to have spooked somewhat the hosts of it because I was supposed to do a return appearance, and they canceled it all of a sudden.
Wow.
Yeah, and I found that very interesting, and certainly I have no problem sharing the story with you and your listeners whenever you're ready for it.
Okay, so we'll set the scene. November 22nd, of course, JFK is murdered in Dealey Plaza in Dallas. Dead, obviously, before he arrives at the hospital in Dallas. His body is then taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital. Where was the autopsy was performed at Bethesda, or was it in Dallas?
It was under, at the time, the assassination of a president was not a federal crime. So at the time in November of 1963, this was essentially first-degree murder under the state of Texas. I mean, you would have charged if Lee Harvey Oswald had lived, he would have been charged for with first-degree murder under Texas state law. There was no federal crime of assassinating the president. So if Oswald had lived, he would have been charged with murder of the president under state law. Accordingly. The autopsy should have been done in Dallas. But as you are aware, and I just picked this up just from talking to you, of course, the body was somewhat illegally removed from Parkland Hospital, which is where Kennedy died. This is where he was taken after Dealey Plaza. And he was flown back to, whatever would have been the military base.
Bethesda Naval Hospital?
Yeah, well, what's the Air Force base right in Maryland there? Is it Edwards? I can't remember.
Not sure.
Yeah, he would have been flown back to the Air Force base right outside D.C. It's right over the river in either Virginia or Maryland. And then he would have been taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital, and that's where the autopsy was.
Whoops. Okay, so at what point was the brain supposedly found to be missing? Found to be missing. When did they notice it was missing?
Right. Well, during the autopsy, Kennedy's brain was removed. It was removed from the body, and it was actually put in, I believe, stored. I would presume in formaldehyde, and it was actually stored as evidence, believe it or not, in the National Archives as potential crime scene evidence, and that's where it stayed. And it wasn't until years later, during the trial brought by Jim Garrison, he subpoenaed the National Archives to examine the brain in an effort to try to dissect the track of the head wound. Of course, this is the whole crux of the Kennedy assassination. The Warren report has the bullet coming from behind. Of course, if you watch the Zapruder film, your naked eyes will tell you that headshot comes from the front. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yes.
So at any rate, the idea was they wanted to examine the brain to try to find the track of the bullet to determine where it came from. And it was at this point in time that it was announced that the brain had gone missing from the National Archives, presumably whereabouts unknown. And it has always been somewhat in the world of conspiracy that the CIA or J. Edgar Hoover had it removed or had it destroyed because this could have implicated them. Of course, that was the idea, or at least the theory that that there was a sinister force at work that had removed the brain. Don't get me wrong; I do believe that there was a conspiracy to kill Kennedy. I think it's pretty irrefutable, but the story that was told to me contradicts that, and was explained to me that how the brain went missing and the motivation behind it, and it had nothing to do with the CIA or the FBI, or in fact a conspiracy involved a conspiracy to kill Kennedy.
All right. Oh, I just want to point out it's Andrews Air Force Base is where
That's it.
the body was flown just outside of Washington D.C. Okay, so
That's correct.
um, in other words, the person close to the Kennedy family told you the story, which kind of refutes the conspiracy aspect that the brain wasn't removed to hide evidence of an assassination or a conspiracy. In other words, that he was shot from anywhere but behind in the sixth floor of the Texas Book Depository building. So, what happened to the brain?
Well, according to my source, and I have every reason to believe this person, the brain was removed from the National Archives by Robert F. Kennedy, JFK's brother, and it was removed in 1967. And Robert Kennedy's motivation for removing the brain was he was exceedingly worried that the brain was going to wind up, or parts of the brain were going to wind up in a freak show, basically, like as part of a carnival attraction or in the hands of a collector or something like that. And he was deathly afraid that the brain was going to fall into the wrong hands and like essentially be put on display somewhere. The brain, Kennedy accessed the National Archives, removed the brain. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. In 1967, John F. Kennedy's body was moved in Arlington National Cemetery. It was buried in one place, but then in 1967, when they were building the permanent monument where he is now, with the flame, this was in 1967, the body was moved. And it was during this removal of the body that Robert Kennedy took the brain out of the National Archives and put it in his brother's coffin. And it was buried with his brother where it is today in Arlington National Cemetery.
Wow. Just placed what? I don't want to get too graphic here, but what? Just placed in a jar and placed somewhere in the casket, or
presumably that's I never got into with this person. I presume it was in some sort of storage jar. The way it was told to me that the jar was essentially placed into the coffin and was reinterred in Arlington Cemetery with the body, where it would never be disturbed and it would never fall into the wrong hands of someone devious or nefarious or who was going to put it on display. I suppose it's possible that the brain was removed. And if that was the case, then at this point in time, this would have disintegrated long ago. But my understanding was the brain was removed in its storage container by Robert Kennedy, the president's brother, and placed in the coffin with his, with his deceased brother when in 1967 when the body was reinterred in Arlington National Cemetery. That is the story that was told to me. I did not witness this firsthand, of
Hmm.
course. I have no firsthand knowledge of this, but that was the story that was related to me, and I had no reason to doubt it. And Richard, like I said, this was told to me many years ago. This wasn't something that just popped up or I learned 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago. This was told to me many years ago. And again, this was not told to me under any pretense of don't relate this story to anybody. This is top secret information, or I work for the government. It just came from a Kennedy family friend, and that was the story that was told to me.
Well, I mean, it's fascinating. I don't necessarily think that it pr- um, proves that there wasn't a conspiracy necessarily.
I agree. No, I agree with you.
I mean, both things can be true. He could have still been
Yes,
shot from the front. Yes, the although you'd have to think that if Robert Kennedy believed that his brother was the victim of a conspiracy and that Oswald didn't act alone or that there were others involved, that he would be interested in using the brain for evidence. But anyway, let's talk about James Bond. You've been rewatching all of the Bond films from, I guess, beginning to end. Beginning with, is it Doctor No is the first one, right?
correct. Right.
All the way up to, well, how far did you get?
Right now, I'm up to the first one with Timothy Dalton was the last one I watched. So that would have been The Living Daylights.
Right. Yes. Okay. So what spurred you to want to watch them all over again?
Right. Well, my motivation for watching them all over was I received as a gift the James Bond Blu-ray box set, which was put out in 2020, which has all the movies on it. It's a wonderful box set. If you're a James Bond fan, you have to have it. And this has all of them, all the way from No, Doctor No, all the way up to Spectre. And it's just a great box set. And I'm currently working on some revised editions of my earlier books, so I thought this would be a great opportunity to go back and rewatch all the James Bond movies and just see if I missed anything, and how they've evolved, and things I might have missed, and just take a look at them again with a fresh set of eyes. And yeah, there was some interesting things that I most certainly picked up upon. Um, I found some eerie foreshadowing in some of them. For example, I've come on your show before, and I've talked at length about the 9/11 being prophesized in film. And again, it's they are far removed from time. I'm not going to say they're not, but there was a somewhat of a curious little 9/11 reference in both Doctor. No, let's see, it was a Thunderball and the one after it, which is You Only Live Twice. And it was in Thunderball, if you recall. It's at the meeting of Spectre. It's when Blofeld is introduced. Um, he actually, it's interesting because he actually accuses. If you remember Spectre, they all go by the numbers.
Yes.
Number one is Blofeld, and in Thunderball number two was Emil Largo. Um, but anyway, he accuses of number 9 and 11 of embezzlement of all things. And during the scene, he actually winds up executing number 9, and his body drops below. And then when you fast forward to the very next movie, which is You Only Live Twice, he actually winds up killing number 11 in that one. I found that just curious. Of all the numbers in the world to pick, number 9 and 11, and they wind up see if you watch the movie, they're actually sitting next to each other at the table of all things.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, so I found that very curious. I thought, oh wow, I mean, that kind of made me sit up on my chair a little bit. And then the one thing that I found interesting was the whole thing with this, with the whole thing with the World Economic Forum going on right now with Davos and Klaus
Hmm.
Schwab and things like that. And if you watch the one with George Lazenby, this is the one that is
Her
without
Majesty's Secret
it's
Service.
on Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is the one without Roger Moore and Sean Connery. Sort of the in between lost movie there with George Lazenby. It's interesting because there's a scene in it where Bond is investigating Blofeld in Switzerland, of all places. And Blofeld, much like Klaus Schwab, is bald headed, chrome domed. And in that movie, you can't help but think of the World Economic Forum because Blofeld's whole scheme is to use viruses and vaccines to manipulate humanity. and use technology, and you just watch it and you think, my goodness gracious, I mean, isn't this what's going on right now with the World Economic Forum? I mean, here's Blofeld, laying out his plan in Switzerland of all places.
Hmm.
It's just really uncanny. I found that very interesting, and certainly a person you can go back and watch that movie. And then the other one that I picked up on was when I was watching, and I think this was intentional also. I was watching The Man with the Golden Gun. This
Hmm.
is the second one of Roger Moore's. I think this is 1975, I want to say. And I've been on your show many times talking about how, I call it a cult casting, how these filmmakers would cast people, sort of invoke a past performance or to carry, their baggage from an earlier movie. And it's interesting because when I was watching this, and if you watch The Man with the Golden Gun, the whole movie is essentially about the power of the sun, solar energy. Lee has the golden gun, which is again a an emblem of the sun, what have you. The whole thing revolves around solar energy. And if you look at it, the two people in the movie is Lee, who is the villain, Scaramanga, and then you had the Bond girl in this one, which is Britt Eklund. And what makes this so interesting was it was just the year before, 2 years before, in '73 or '74. It's when Lee and Britt Eklund, of all people, played cinema's probably two most famous sun worshippers of them all in The Wicker Man, where this is where Lee was Lord Summerisle.
Christopher
And
Lee?
yeah, yeah, right. Christopher Lee played Lord Summerisle, and I just couldn't help but think to myself when I was watching The Man with the Golden Gun. I thought, wow, the filmmakers of this must have been a huge fan of The Wicker Man, because they're just using the same two actors, Eklund and Lee, who arguably just came off of playing cinema's most two famous sun worshippers in The Wicker Man, and here they are in this Bond movie, which is all about solar energy. I found that couldn't be a coincidence. I found that was very well done, and I completely believe that to be intentional. So yeah, I'm right now going back and watching all the Bond movies again, and certainly it's fun to do.
Um, and the is there a trend or not a trend, but in the Bond films that carries over? Because we've talked about different types of occult symbology. We've talked about Hermeticism, and we've talked about alchemy, and we've talked about Gnosticism. Is there one of those present in the Bond films consistently?
Oh sure, this was talked about. I mean, it's you have the same theme essentially in all the Bond movies, and it definitely emerges out of the world of Hermeticism, alchemy, where you have in a nutshell. I mean, they all follow the same track. Where Bond is what you would want to call the solar hero, and he meets the moon, the lunar feminine, the sacred feminine, and of course they wind up. It's often, sometimes, not always. The female is usually, not always, but usually in the employ of the villain, and Bond is able to persuade her to come around to seeing things his way, and of course they unite. Um, sexually, the union of opposites. This is what you would call it in alchemy, coincidentia oppositorum. And of course, after this occurs, this now spiritually equips Bond 007, John D, to go on and defeat the over the top Bond villain. This is the theme that's prevalent throughout the stories. And yes, I mean, this comes completely out of the world of Hermeticism, alchemy, Gnosticism. And again, this should really come as no surprise to anybody. I've been on your show before talking about the Aleister Crowley influence upon Ian Fleming, and the other people in Fleming's crowd, Dennis Wheatley, Roald Dahl, people like that.
Robert, we'll take a quick time out, come back. I want to circle back to Ian Fleming and Aleister Crowley and John Dee, who you mentioned as well. Stay with
Sure.
us.
What would it feel like to reclaim your health, your vitality, to sleep deeply, to live fully, to address health at the root, at the cellular level, so that your body can detect damage where you have it? Imagine living younger, longer, having the energy to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Discomfort fading away. ASEA Redox Supplement harnesses the power of your body to heal itself, giving you the ability to power your potential. This is one of the most profound health, athletic, and anti-aging discoveries of our lifetime, and we need the world to know about it. If you want to learn more about ASEA, visit strangeplanet.teamasea.com, strangeplanet.teamasea.com, and be sure to text or call my colleague and friend Lynn at 443-254-6024, 443 254-6024 to order or for additional information. ASEA Redox Supplement. It's truly wellness redefined.
And we are back with Robert W. Sullivan IV, and we're talking about cinema, symbology in cinema. And we were talking about James Bond. There is kind of a hermeticism that's a common thread throughout the James Bond franchise, if you will. You were mentioning John Dee, and I think we've talked about this before, but this is a fascinating character, an historical character. He was kind of Queen Elizabeth I's, astrologer, chief spy. Would that be fair to call him a spy?
Oh, absolutely. Elizabeth's spy master was a guy named Sir Francis Walsingham, but Dee went on an espionage mission for her, and this was I get asked this. I say, "Oh, you say Dee was a spy, but when was he a spy?" The answer is he toured the Holy Roman Empire, and he really was sent there to wreak havoc with Rudolph II. Rudolph II was into the occult arts and into mysticism, and Dee went there and just wreaked havoc with him. Was constantly giving him astrological prognostications that were negative, that were very dire, that were intended to drive him insane or make him sick. And this was what Dee's chief spy mission was essentially to undermine the Holy Roman Empire. And Rudolph II was warned about this. Many of his advisors said, you stay away from this guy. This guy's bad news. This guy John Dee is bad news. But of course, he was eventually given an audience with Rudolph II, and again, his entire mission was sort of to undermine the Holy Roman Emperor.
And John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's astrologer, sometimes spy, was the inspiration for 007. How did that come about?
Right. Well, that's the call letters for James Bond, which is 007. They come from John Dee. When he would write espionage correspondences back to the Queen, he would sign them 007, 007. And if you look at the sigil, it's actually meant to look like spyglasses. It's two circles with a line over them and then a line down the side. It looks like a 7. And of course, the symbol denotes that he was her eyes in the field and that the correspondent was for her eyes only. So, of course, Fleming took this and ran with it. And this is why James Bond is 007. It's an homage, a reference to Queen Elizabeth I's spy, Dr. John Dee himself.
Now, Ian Fleming worked with MI6, right? During the war,
right,
Second World War?
He was in British counterintelligence during World War II, and he handled Aleister Crowley also during World War II.
Yes, when you say handled Aleister Crowley, Crowley was employed by the Allies to what? To cast spells against the Axis powers?
He served as a spy both for the British government in World War I and World War II. He used his secret societies to penetrate German secret societies and gain influence. He tried to get access to Rudolf Hess after he was captured. He went to Fleming, and Fleming went to Churchill. Depends on who you want to listen to. The meeting was Crowley was going to perform rituals in front of Hess. Of course, Hess was a dedicated occultist and astrologer, and Crowley thought that he could scare him and perhaps coax information out of him about the Nazis. Some people say the meeting happened. Most people agree that it did not happen. But no, he worked with British intelligence and tried to gather as much information he can about the Germans, often posing as a German sympathizer, but he was actually a double agent, as it were.
Fascinating chapter.
And you will find also a Crowley influence on Fleming. The two James Bond villains are somewhat loosely based on Crowley. Blofeld, you'll see Crowley's fingerprints on Blofeld, specifically in the novel and the movie, the one we were mentioning, on Her Majesty's Secret Service. If you recall, Blofeld was trying to get himself a coat of arms. He was trying to get himself to be recognized as the Count de Bloshaw, basically nobility. And this reflects Crowley when he was in Cairo. Crowley ran around calling himself Lord Boleskine and pretending to be Scottish nobility. Of course, he wasn't. So that rubs off on the Blofeld character. And Crowley was also a sadomasochist. And in the James Bond story, Casino Royale, the villain Le Chiffre is also a sadomasochist, and those came directly from Aleister Crowley.
Oh, wow. Very cool. I learned so much from you, Robert. Okay, so let's dive into some cinema here. Halloween Ends. This is I guess it's the climax, the final installment of and in the saga of Michael Myers and the Halloween franchise. I don't know. I lost count how many movies there were in the franchise.
There's a lot of them.
Yes. What's going on in terms of occult symbology in Halloween Ends?
Yeah, well, there's a lot going on. Let me just predicate it. They did three movies lately of Halloween. They did Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends, which was the last one. These three movies retconned out of existence all the previous Halloween movies up until one. So you have Halloween 1, and then you go to 18, Kills, and Ends. In that timeline, none of the other movies are canon. So they retconned out the other movies. And it became very apparent when watching Halloween 2018 that the movie makers were completely delving into, symbolism and all kind of, esoteric themes. And when they got around to Ends, the last one, I mean, this thing was just overloaded, with hidden things. The movie really didn't go over well with a lot of Halloween fans because the complaint was there was not a lot of Michael Myers in it. But if you watch it very carefully, I mean, you'll see all kind of references to other John Carpenter movies. I mean, you have the whole idea of the Jungian shadow coming to life. This is a theme explored in movies like Black Swan and Kubrick's The Shining. I mean, there's all sorts of references, that the movie makers are playing with people. If you watch the movie, you'll notice that the opening credits are the Periwinkle Blue. This is a reference to the Halloween 3 opening credits, which are also Periwinkle Blue, and it references it's a reference to several movies. One is Halloween 3 because if you watch that movie, you'll realize that the masks that the mask maker Connell Cochran was making were pure evil, and that was the source of the evil. And if you watch Halloween Ends, you're left with the conclusion that Michael Myers was essentially a man, and it was the mask that was possessed of evil, which was keeping him going, which was the source of his evil. The villain in Halloween 3 is Connell Cochran. The villain in Halloween Ends is Corey Cunningham, CC. C is the third letter of the alphabet. Of course, you have C and C, 3333. This is a reference to the moon. And if you watch Halloween Ends, you will see references to tarot cards all over the place in this thing. The moon, the devil, the death card. These are cited frequently in Halloween Ends, and with great effect, I might add. You have, of course, if you're a fan of the Halloween franchise and you go back to Halloween 1, you will completely recognize or understand that the movie Psycho by Hitchcock was a tremendous influence on this film. And again, in Halloween Ends, we have the Periwinkle Blue credits, and we have the villain Corey Cunningham being dominated by an overbearing mother, the evil mother archetype. And of course, this is a reference to Mrs. Bates in Psycho. And if you go back and watch Psycho, you'll realize that, the burial dress that she was put in was periwinkle blue. It's mentioned in there. Wow. So, of course, when you watch Halloween Ends, the nightgown that the mother's wearing is, of course, periwinkle blue, the reference to Psycho. I thought that was very well done. And, oh, my goodness, references, citations all over the place to earlier John Carpenter movies. I mean, we have The Fog with the radio station. Christine, that's in there. We have They Live with Roddy Piper, the fight with him and Michael Keith. That
goes on forever.
Yeah, that goes on forever, and that's at the end of Halloween Ends with Laurie fighting with Michael Myers. And the one that was really good, I thought that most people missed, was the homeless person who was sort of the thrall for Michael Myers, was sort of the watchman for him. And that's, of course, Prince of Darkness, where Alice Cooper was the homeless person who was sort of keeping an eye on the evil inside the church, the liquid Satan, as it were. So I thought Halloween Ends. I mean, this was a movie when I first watched it. I was sitting back. I've mentioned this on your show, on your shows previously. When I watch a movie for the first time, I kind of watch it for entertainment value. But this one, when I watched Halloween Ends for the first time back in October, I mean, this just started jumping off the screen with me. And I was thinking, oh, my goodness. I can't wait to watch this thing again, and even a second and third or fourth time, because I mean, this was one of those movies that was just begging to be analyzed and just had so much going on in it. I mean, again, it reminds me of a movie like The Shining or Black Swan, where, I mean, it became very, very apparent to me, watching it, that the filmmakers were really, playing around with the viewer's subconscious mind with referencing things, using these occult themes. And this one, the tarot, the deck of the tarot was very omnipresent. And I liked the movie. I thought it was a very well made movie. And it was one that I really am looking forward to writing about, and I certainly like dissecting it on shows.
So the either the director or the whoever wrote the screenplay decided that this was also going to be an homage to John Carpenter as well.
Oh yes, there's no question about it. You will clearly see references to other John Carpenter movies, and like I said, it's one of those movies that you have. And then there's, I mean, I didn't mention this just on my last bit, but there's it's one of those Halloween. I described the movie, if I feel like, as though if David Lynch made a Halloween movie, this would be it, because it's very surreal also, and it plays with the viewer, where you are now questioning what's going on the screen, and it's kind of like I said with The Shining. It reminds me of The Shining and Black Swan, in that like let's take The Shining. Are the ghosts really there, or are they just figments of Jack Torrance's imagination? It's the same thing with this. You will start, if you watch and you pay attention to it, you will start asking yourself, wait a minute, is Michael Myers really there, or is Michael Myers just a figment of this kid's imagination? And the filmmakers really play around with that. And again, it kind of reminds me of a movie like David Lynch. And if you watch it and you've seen a movie like Lost Highway, you will clearly see, again, references to Lynch's Lost Highway in this. And again, it's the idea of, is this really happening, or is it a figment of this kid's imagination? And I thought it works very well.
All right, from one slasher movie to another, when we come back, we'll take a look at Pearl, otherwise known as An Extraordinary Origin Story. Robert W. Sullivan IV stays with us as we discuss cinema symbology.
What would it feel like to reclaim your health, your vitality, to sleep deeply, to live fully, to address health at the root, at the cellular level, so that your body can detect damage where you have it? Imagine living younger, longer, having the energy to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Discomfort fading away. ASEA Redox Supplement harnesses the power of your body to heal itself, giving you the ability to power your potential. This is one of the most profound health, athletic, and anti-aging discoveries of our lifetime, and we need the world to know about it. If you want to learn more about ASEA, visit strangeplanet.teamasea.com, strangeplanet.teamasea.com, and be sure to text or call my colleague and friend Lynn at 443-254-6024, 443-254-6024, to order or for additional information. ASEA Redox Supplement. It's truly wellness redefined.
All right, Robert. So, Pearl, Extraordinary Origin Story. This is directed by Ty West. And just tell us a little bit about this takes place during the influenza pandemic of 1918, right?
Absolutely. And when you watch it, you will clearly see an overlap. I mean, this movie is set there because it is clearly citing the COVID lockdowns and the mask wearing. It's a movie by Ty West. I'm a huge fan of his. His movies, unfortunately, don't get a lot of play. I'm a huge, like I said, I'm a fan of his work. He made a movie several years ago called House of the Devil, which explored the satanic panic of the 1980s. It's a very well made movie. It's an excellent film. Fortunately, it just doesn't get the love that it should, I suppose. But he recently released a movie called X. I saw them out of order, and X was the first movie in this trilogy that he's doing. The second movie is called Pearl, which is a origin story of one of the characters in X, this very bizarre old woman on this farm, and we get to see her origin in this movie Pearl. It's played by Mia Goth, and my goodness gracious. You want to talk about the Academy Awards not giving someone their due. I mean, my God, you watch this movie, and it's like, how can Mia Goth not possibly get nominated for an Oscar in this movie? I mean, it's just amazing I mean, it's one of the most amazing acting performances I've ever seen. I mean, if Natalie Portman got nominated for Black Swan and won, Mia Goth should have easily have been nominated for Pearl. She plays as a psychopath essentially, and like I said, it's part of a trilogy. X was the first movie, Pearl is the second. I believe the third movie is coming out this year called Maxine, I want to say. So I'm looking very forward to that, much forward to that. But no, I mean, if you watch Pearl, very alchemical. Again, we have the transition of self from sort of this lonely, disturbed farm girl into a full blown psychopath. And again, this is denoted with the color red. We have the little homage there with the goat of Mendes. This is an A24 film where she, after she murders, she kind of goes up and greets the goat. A24 is the company that put out The Witch by Roger Eggers. And if you've seen that, I'm a very big fan of that movie as well. Of course, the Black Phillip goat is a total homage to the goat of Mendes, Baphomet,
Mhm.
which actually becomes the devil in the movie, if you've ever seen it. And again, this Pearl was an A24 movie, so I couldn't help but think that one was citing the other. And it's a great film. I mean, again, I just loved it how they referenced some of the earlier works. In this case, we have Polanski. If you're a Polanski fan like I am, and you've seen his movie Repulsion, this was Polanski's answer to Hitchcock's Psycho. And if you've watched Repulsion, you will realize, and it's not concealed. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the mental deterioration of the young woman played by Catherine Deneuve in in Repulsion is represented by a decaying meat with maggots and rot in it. And Ty West uses the same trick in this movie. There is a roasted pig that is brought over and eventually gets infested with maggots and decay and rots away. And of course, this symbolizes Pearl's mental deterioration as well. And that is a total citation to Polanski's Repulsion. And it works very effectively. It's quite repulsive to watch in the film, but that's where West is going with it. And again, it's just a very creepy movie. If you're into horror, if you're into suspense, if you're into thriller, you should like it. If you're a fan of The Shining or Black Swan, this movie is for you. And again, I really felt as though Mia Goth got snubbed on it because I found her performance was just, very captivating. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen whenever she was on. I was just completely blown away by it.
Whether we're talking about the occult symbology like Gnosticism or Hermeticism or occult casting, where a particular character may just be a cameo to sort of harken back to an earlier role, or you talked about in Halloween and the use of certain colors and so forth. I mean, that's pretty subtle stuff, a lot of it. I mean, who's that intended for? I mean, other than Robert W. Sullivan the fourth, and maybe some, students of film, who's going to pick up on that? And what is the purpose of putting it in there?
Well, it layers the movie for starters. It makes the movie sublime. It turns it into artwork. It's like, how many books are written about decoding, Da Vinci's paintings. It's the same sort of idea behind it. It turns the movie into a work of art, a multi-layered work of art. And it's a challenge to decode this stuff. Like I said, it's like playing a game of chess. To the passive viewer who's not aware of it, it's meant for them as well, but it's meant for their subconscious mind. They will take it in, and they will process it subconsciously and not aware of the impression that's being made upon them. And again, the movies that do it properly are, if it's done properly, these movies are, it's like drawing a moth to a flame. It will pull you in. I mean, it's you watch the very first Halloween movie. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. You go back to 1978. I mean, you have very archetypal images. I mean, you have the personification of evil with Michael Myers stalking on the one night of the year where evil is allowed to roam free. This is all archetypal. This represents the death of the sun. Of course, the archetypal imagery, if you're into Hermeticism, this comes from the heavens above. As above, so below. So the idea is if you're using this heavenly imagery, these archetypes, and showing it to people, it's connecting them to an ethereal realm, whether they're aware of it or not, and it's manipulating them subconsciously. I'm trained to see it. I mean, I've trained myself to look for it. And again, this, Richard, is one of the reasons why I wrote my books, because to me, and I've seen enough of it to know that I'm well beyond the coincidence, in this, that it's just astounding to me the length that these guys will, I mean, especially the guys who are very sophisticated, will go to embed their movies, to layer the movies with this stuff. And it just works so effectively. And again, a lot of people don't pick up on. I'm with you there. I mean, a lot of people don't pick up on this consciously. If you study the movie and you start delving into the occult sciences and the hermetic arts and alchemy, you'll definitely be able to pick up on this stuff.
Well, it gives me I mean, I have a great appreciation for directors. I mean, you have to be at almost the genius level, I would think, and knowledgeable in so many different disciplines. But now I even respect them more because, I mean, their knowledge, in order to layer these films with symbolism and so forth, it's just astounding. We were talking about trends in movies the last time you were on. What's happening in terms of, I don't know, symbology or the direction of films now that you've picked up on?
What the one thing I've noticed more than any other is, and I suppose this comes from being a horror buff, is anytime right now, at least of recent, and at least the movies I've seen, anytime you're dealing with a movie involving a haunted house of some kind, there will inevitably be an homage to The Shining in there. This seems to be the big thing going on. The two movies that jump to mind are, I mean, they're new, relatively new. Was The Conjuring Part Two, which was I think came out about 5 or 6, 7 years ago now. This was, I think, 2016. And again, this was the one where there was the haunted house in England. And there is a clear reference to Kubrick's The Shining in there. I think there's more than one, but the one that I remember off the top of my head right now is when the demon Valak goes into the Warrens' home and is standing at the end of the hallway. That is intentionally designed to recall The Shining, where Danny sees the two twins standing at the end of the hallway. If you think I'm stretching this, if you pull up the scene where Danny is looking at the twins in the Overlook, and you pull up the scene where Elizabeth Warren is looking at Valak, the demon Valak, dressed as the nun at the end of the hallway, something will become very apparent to you, and that is the wallpaper in the Warrens' home in their hallway is the identical wallpaper in the Overlook Hotel. So that is a clear reference to The Shining. And then you'll find this again, where in a movie more recently, this was a Guillermo del Toro movie, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. There's again another Shining reference in there, and it's the same sort of thing where we have a long hallway and a monster approaching from this long hallway, and again you're directed, your mind is consciously or subconsciously is directed back to Kubrick's The Shining, and we know this because right before that scene, there's a scene where it takes place in a hospital, and I think they're looking at the directory in the hospital, and I think that one of the rooms they're looking for is the Red Room, and of course, where I'm going with
Red
this
Rum,
Red Rum,
murder. Yeah.
of course, Red Rum, exactly. And again, this is a total direction of your mind back to Kubrick's The Shining. So yeah, the one trend that I'm noticing is that if you're dealing, if a director right now wants to make a movie involving a haunted house, there inevitably seems to be a reference in there, a citation to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining.
Quick word on this. I just learned recently that at one time, the Jack Torrance character in The Shining, Robin Williams was considered for that role. Have you heard that? And what do you how do you think that movie would have? Because I think in the book, Jack Torrance is kind of a more of a likable, relatable character. Do you think Robin Williams would have been a good choice to play Jack Torrance instead of Jack Nicholson?
That was one of Stephen King's main complaints about it was in the novel, the Torrance character is just a normal, fun-loving guy who gets turned into this axe murderer. If you watch Kubrick's movie, you have Jack Nicholson, who starts pretty much as a weirdo, sort of this strange character who's kind of very eccentric and kind of mean-spirited towards his wife and kids. and becomes even stranger. This was King's one of his big gripes with it. I like Nicholson in the movie. It's kind of hard for me to picture Williams in it, but yeah, I mean, I could. I guess if I picture in my mind's eye Robin Williams, yeah, I think he could have pulled it off. I mean, I certainly think he had the acting chops for it. But I like Nicholson's performance as well. I know King didn't, but I like Kubrick's movie. But I understand Kubrick's movie isn't what King wanted. But I like Kubrick's movie because it works on it's very esoteric, and that appeals to me.
All right, so we'll look forward to Cinema Symbolism #4, and in the meantime, direct us to a website.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Richard, for having me on Strange Planet. It's my pleasure. It was my pleasure to be here. My website is my name. If you're interested in me or my books or want more information, just go there. It's my name, which is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is just that. It's www.robertwsullivan, and then the letter I, the letter V, Roman numerals for the fourth, robertwsullivaniv.com. There's links to purchase the books, information about me, information about shows that I'm coming on, podcasts. It's a very easy site to navigate. Just go there, www.robertwsullivaniv.com.
And I've got the link in the episode notes. And we're going to get you on Coast soon. So,
that sounds great.
Talk soon. All right, Robert. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
A new Richard Syrett's Strange Planet drops every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Subscribe at strangeplanetpodcast.com.